The Lucasfilm Story Group and members therein may be in a bit of hot water if a recent rumor is to be believed. Hollywood scooper and insider Kamran Pasha is saying to us now that the Lucasfilm Story Group may be dismantled in the future. And not only that, but high visibility members of that panel, of that infamous panel, including Pablo Hidalgo, who has been involved in a number of scandals, may all be going to the wayside and leaving Lucasfilm potentially with numbers as high as 70% of the Lucasfilm Story Group being exited from that panel. Joining us to talk about this potential and doing this on the heels of major other Disney news where they've had a shakeup now also on the board. So there's all kinds of tumultuous stuff at Disney. But joining us to talk about all this is Lorn, the Star Wars guru, Lorn Connor of thatparkplace.com, and also the investigative journalist at thatparkplace.com, Jonas Campbell. Welcome to you both. Just to give the full context to everybody of what's going on here, we're essentially looking at a situation where the story group at Lucasfilm has been known to not be the best, let's say. And we all know that. We also know that Pablo Hidalgo is one of the most famous individuals who sometimes is associated with the story group. At other times, perhaps he's not. That gets a little bit fuzzy. But he was specifically named by Kamran Pasha as being one of the ones that is on the way out. So, Lorn, could you just run us through a few of the things that have happened in the past regarding Pablo Hidalgo and why he may be in this kind of position where some people don't mind seeing him go?
Well, he's kind of been an interesting character because he started off as the website administrator back when StarWars.com launched. He became known as a real heavy lore guy. He's been in many, many videos for StarWars.com over the years, commenting on the shows that they have, specific lore issues. He's been involved in writing articles for Star Wars Insider. I think he was even involved in writing a couple of books that were about the lore in the original EU before Disney picked it up. I think he was kind of the one of us kind of people that was in Lucasfilm, and he's been there for probably about 20 years. I think it's been something like that. The issues started coming up, I think, primarily after the Disney acquisition. He finagled his way into the story group. I think the promise of the story group was the idea that there was going to be this unified canon where everything would count: the books, the comic books, any of the audio adaptations. It was all going to be at the same level as the movies and the TV shows. In practice, that's not what happened. And it's kind of easy to understand why. I think what the fans wanted was some constraints on what would be done in the TV shows and the movies so that they would align with the published material. But that's not what a director wants to do. It's not what a writer wants to do. They want to tell the story that they want to tell. And so what I think functionally happened in the story group was they became advocates for the people that were producing the movies and the TV shows. And the idea became that because you want to appease those people who want to tell their stories, if it's a cinematic version, whether that be TV or movie, it will still supersede the written materials just like they did before. And I think that irritated a lot of fans. When Lucasfilm got pushback, then the story group or people associated with them started lashing out. You started seeing these fanboy tears mugs and taking subtle digs and not so subtle digs. And the article that you have up right now, how the Lucasfilm execs tweet reopen the wounds of The Last Jedi, I think is what really got Pablo on a lot of people's radar. This was... I think by most people interpreted it as just a snarky attack on probably the biggest Star Wars fan on YouTube. He did have to come out with an apology after it started making waves. His explanation was that this was a snarky, self-referential, sarcastic comment that was directed at himself.
Right.
But if that were the case, first of all, why was it taking place in a hidden conversation? Secondly, why did you put it up as your Twitter masthead? His explanation for that was that, well, everybody was asking him what was taking place, so he put it up there so he could see it while keeping his own conversations private. I guess the most charitable interpretation of that could be that what he actually quoted was when Star Wars Theory had his reaction to the Luke Skywalker return in The Mandalorian Season 2, he was emotional about it. He broke out in tears. As a child, he had survived cancer. Luke Skywalker was his hero. This was the Luke that he wanted to see, just like most fans. What Pablo had shared was emotions are not for sharing. Now, like I said, the most charitable interpretation of that could be maybe he was saying that his own emotions weren't for sharing because he was so touched by Star Wars Theory's reaction. But I've got a few bridges to sell you if you buy into that interpretation.
Yeah, and let's read the response that Pablo Hidalgo made back in 2020 when he was perceived as having mocked a major Star Wars fan, one of the biggest Star Wars fans out there, and really mocked him in a way that was especially hurtful, given the past of overcoming cancer and all that. The response that he gave was, "I wish to clarify that my post that emotions are not to be shared was sarcastic self-mockery and was certainly not intended to be hurtful to anyone, and I'm deeply sorry that it was. As a lifelong fan, I appreciate fans expressing how they feel. It's what being a fan is about." Now, Pablo Hidalgo would go on to get in trouble a year later, and I don't exactly recall what that one was about. Jonas, Lorn, do either one of you remember what that one was a year ago? I remember that we covered it. He got into a sticky situation again.
I do remember there was some talk around that time that there was a thought that he might have been removed from Lucasfilm or
Right, we
had
think he
left
may have been reprimanded,
or
but I
had
don't remember
left.
exactly what it was that he did at that time.
Yeah, he did remove all references to Lucasfilm from his Twitter bio at some point,
Right,
Yeah, I
for a
think that's
caused
what
a
it
while,
lot
was.
of speculation.
Yeah. All right. So we want to say, too, we don't have verification that the Lucasfilm Story Group is being let go. We don't have verification that Pablo Hidalgo is being let go. And we want the best for everybody. So, we're not trying to dogpile on Pablo Hidalgo and be mean to him. This is a business discussion. We're discussing a studio that makes business decisions, and we're discussing some of the personnel and some of the things that they've decided to do in the past. That said, Kamran Pasha is citing a source, and he had that right, 2 or 3 months ago, maybe not even that long ago, when he beat everybody else by 2 days on a story about Disney doing a hiring freeze. And that was one of the biggest stories in the industry. It's a huge story. And he beat everybody to it with his source. So we have to take it with we've got to take it with the seriousness that it deserves when he comes out and says this sort of thing. Jonas, in your opinion, with Lucasfilm, this story group to me doesn't serve much of a purpose. The story's all over the place and is nonsensical with Star Wars. 2, one of the biggest things that they did was they got involved with the development of Galaxy's Edge in Disneyland and Walt Disney World. I don't think that that's been a well-received area of either park at all. One of the rides is popular, but that's about it. If you were looking at this studio and this story group, and if it is true that Kathleen Kennedy is going to be moving on to a different position later on, maybe at the end of this year, what would you recommend to incoming leadership in terms of how to set up some sort of system at Lucasfilm that would prevent situations like what they've had in the past years with all of this messiness?
Well, I think the essential step in any change at Lucasfilm right now is first an optical one, trying to do something that appeases the fans without looking too much like you're just appeasing the fans. And as Lorn alluded to before, the Lucasfilm Story Group is directly a Kathleen Kennedy invention and did not exist before she was there. And they seem to keep track of the canon just fine. I'm sure there are continuity issues in the Legends canon, but Legends is pretty much beloved, and probably the attack on it was maybe one of the things that made it even more popular today. I would say that they should go back to whatever they were doing before, whether it was just asking Dave Filoni what he thinks, raising the idea of that spirit of people who want to thrive on George Lucas's original vision there. I think it needs to seem like it's grassroots and coming from everywhere, and just take their licks when they mess something up.
So
Jonas, you made a connection. Go ahead, Lorn.
I do kind of want to jump in there because I do think that there are a couple of cases where there is some retconning that's taken place in the new canon. Primarily, that's related to the Bad Batch. With they essentially retconned a Kanan comic book series that had taken place before. You also have the latest Tales of the Jedi series that retcon portions of both Dooku Jedi Lost and the Ahsoka novel that came out before.
That's true.
If you're going to ask me what needs to happen is the story group, I don't think is fulfilling the purpose that it was intended for, but I'm not sure that it could if you're going to continue to do movies and TV shows. But what they should have is one person who is designated as the creative visionary. There needs to be one person who decides what is Star Wars while that person is in charge of continuity. That's what George was. And I don't think that kind of storytelling can be done by committee.
Agreed.
Well, I think that at least it was supposed to be some sort of quality control system. But from the very beginning, it was introduced as sort of an experimental, all-female, ideologically driven kind of system by Kathleen Kennedy. You'll recall the whole deal about, well, and I don't remember which publication put this out, but they did a big story about how they were all going to, at the time, the leader of the story group, her name was Kiri Hart, and they were all going to her house, gather around campfires, just all women. And, I would think that that's a negative if it was all men. That's it doesn't give you diversity of opinions and views and all the things that come about by being either a man or a woman. I don't want to get into all of that stuff, all that hotbed of issues. But Jonas, you did make a connection that sort of related to this before coming on the video today. And I hope I'm not putting you too much on the spot, but the Walt Disney Company made a big time shift. And really the company is in a tumultuous period. I mean, they've gotten rid of their CEO in just the last few months, replaced him with the predecessor. There's been all sorts of drama regarding the company not hitting the success milestones they want, either in streaming or at the box office. Seems that the parks are losing demand as they are beginning to now push out all sorts of efforts to get consumers back into at least the Walt Disney World Resort. But one of the big things that's just broken in the last few hours is that they have now tossed away their director of the board of directors, the chair of the board of directors, Susan Arnold, and have replaced her with a new chair. And that new chair, in a roundabout way, has a connection with an old Star Wars, shall we say, marketing push. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Are you referring to the old Star Wars marketing push in China?
Well, I'm talking about the Force is Female and the connection that we made there.
Yes, because the Force is Female was a Nike ad campaign, and the entire, forgive me for turning a phrase, the Force is Female was a bit forced because Star Wars has always, of course, had strong female characters from the very start. Princess Leia, no one complained about Leia being a general. She's one of the few original trilogy characters that no one complained about her position in the sequel trilogy, because that is where she was destined to be, as a leader and a fighter. She started out as the princess who didn't really need to be rescued, but circumstances went there. But the Force is Female campaign, it was a nice ring, but it hasn't really borne any fruit that has caused merchandise to move for the Disney company. And there may be some resonation with fans on some level, but it's very hard to perceive that as far as box office.
But what comes to my mind is that this person now taking over the chair position over the board was over Nike at the same time that the Nike marketing geniuses were thinking that was wise, going along with whoever was making those kinds of decisions at Disney, when they were coming up with mottos and slogans which were exclusive to one gender. And that doesn't seem to me to be a very wise way of attracting a wide swath of consumer base. But yet that's what they had decided they should do for a franchise that was previously aimed at boys. That's the entire reason that Disney bought it. But Lorn, final thoughts on how do we get this cleaned up? Where should Star Wars be going in terms of outreach to fans to try to begin repairing some of these, just the bad blood that exists? And it's really amazing kind of thing that there's a company out there that has such bad blood with the people who want to consume the product they produce. But that's where we are. What needs to happen to begin fixing that relationship?
There's a very good chance that it's too late now. I don't know that it's actually reparable. The Disney's stock, or rather Star Wars stock, has fallen so far that I don't know that you can still consider it a AAA property. That aside, if you were going
Lorn,
to try...
let me say this. Pause for just a minute. You're exactly right, because some of our sources within various industries have told us that Star Wars is no longer considered an evergreen property, which is a designation inside the industry referring to franchises which have 365 interest, right, and are not project-based interest franchises. So continue on, but I just want to say you had that exactly right, and it's what the experts inside the industries now realize.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think what they have to do is probably the one thing that they won't do. They need to have somebody who is the creative visionary for what Star Wars is and where it should be going. In my opinion, that should be Jon Favreau. I think there are other people that would say Dave Filoni. I like a lot of what Filoni does, but he's also done a lot of stuff that I don't like. I'm more skeptical about him. I would like to see Filoni supporting Jon Favreau. I think that would be a good way to go. But it also requires some contrition on Disney's part. They need to recognize that they've been antagonistic towards their fans. Part of the reason that the story group got into hot water with the fans is because they were mocking the fans. And some of us have some longer memories that remember when Star Wars was dead after the original trilogy. These people wouldn't have their jobs if there wasn't a revival of Star Wars that took place in the early 90s. And it created this groundswell of support. It made Lucasfilm an awful lot of money, and it made these people and their positions possible within Lucasfilm. And I guess the way I would put it is that when I was a kid, I had a friend who was a little bit spoiled by his parents. He would get every action figure, every toy that came out. And when he would come over to visit my place, if I had some toy that he didn't have, it would mysteriously be broken before he left each time. That's kind of what it feels like the story group became. They get a little big for their britches because they were in this position where they had a lot of power. And when Lucas was no longer there as the creative visionary, they saw that they could hijack the property and use it to push their own agenda and their own story, and essentially to hell with whoever it was that was a fan of it before. Now we were the toxic fans, and they didn't need to cater to us anymore. They came and they stole our toys.
I think that's exactly right. I think the strategy of the people at Lucasfilm was on par with a fast food restaurant that greets their customers by calling them fatties. I mean, that's really the level of stupidity it takes to viciously attack your own fans, your own consumers, the people who make it possible for you to do your job. Well, gentlemen, it's been great. We're going to wrap it there. Again, we don't know what's going to happen with the Lucasfilm Story Group. We don't know what's going to happen with Pablo Hidalgo. We wish everybody the best. I mean, we really do. We really want the best for everybody. But again, Kamran Pasha has put out this leak from one of his sources. He nailed a huge story with the Walt Disney Company just a few months ago. And so we're going to treat this latest report from him with the same level of gravitas you would for anybody who had a major leak come true and now has another one. You can find both Lorn Connor and Jonas Campbell on Twitter. It's at Lorn Connor on Twitter, and it's at Jonas J. Campbell on Twitter. Remember to follow me at WDW Pro 1 on Twitter. You can also find all of us on thatparkplace.com. Please make sure to hit like, subscribe, share, notifications, have them on. We're a new channel, and we're trying to grow. Make sure to give us some feedback and let us know what you want to hear. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, keep having fun.